My friends, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here. So, this guy needs no introduction. This is one of my best friends, Jimmy from the UAP Files. Absolute legend. And may I say, this is his first ever podcast interview. In fact, the last time he was interviewed was in Washington for a documentary made by J.J. Abrams. So we are very, very lucky indeed. I don't need to rattle on about just how awesome his Instagram account is, which has led to the reason that I've got this channel in the first place, or how much fun we have doing the podcast together. He's one of the coolest people in the game. So grab yourself a brew, buckle up, get ready for a few laughs, and let's see what Jimmy's got to say.
Hey, Tom Vernon UAP, how are you?
Hello, Jimmy, captain on the deck. Yeah. It's great to see you, man. Isn't this nice?
Yeah. We were due a catch up.
We were. I was thinking, as much as I love doing the interviews together, we never actually get time for a chat. And the UAP files is exploding and going into the moon, and I think it'd be nice for people to get a bit in your head and see what's going on in there.
Chaos. In my head, it's chaos. It's just little dancing people, music playing, somebody asking me a question, three more people asking me questions, and just and never stopping until the early hours of the morning. But no, it's fun. It is fun,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's definitely going to be one of the questions because how your time management works. I think there's some sorcery involved, frankly. But so I mean, I guess a good place to start off is how did the UAP files come about? What sparked you off? I know you were hot on the press, if not the first person to stream the congressional hearing with David Grush, which was, the one that first blew the doors open for a lot of people. But talk me through it. How did you even get interested in that? Because most people don't even know that happened.
Yeah. Well, I think it was because of COVID. So we were all indoors, weren't we? And we weren't allowed to go out, and we got in trouble if we went out, and we could only go out if we were sort of pretending to run and all that sort of stuff. So we spent a lot more time on social media than we do now, and we spend a lot of time now. So it was like all of our life was on social media, and we talked about this before. Like I've had a sort of a vague interest in the subject for a while, and from child, but it's the standard stuff, isn't it? You watched E.T. and the films that spark the interest in a lot of kids about the unknown. But that's a mixture of things. It's ghosts, it's aliens, all those different things, that monsters and werewolves and what have you. But yeah, and it kind of stuck in the back of my head. And then I think I had some knowledge of the 2017 stuff that started to pick up again with Grush, not with Grush, sorry, with Elizondo and the Navy footage and stuff. And that article, it was kind of in my sort of consciousness somewhere, I guess. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but I was aware of it. But it was like I was aware of a lot of things at the time, and it didn't take up much of my brain capacity at the time. But then COVID came in, and then Grush was like, and for me, having somebody putting their hand up and saying, under oath, this is real, and this is my credentials, and I'm super high level, and I'm, like the most credible person, that was just astounding. I'm sat there on the sofa with my wife saying, like, this is weird. And it had this, I don't know if that's the ontological shock that people use that term a lot, don't they? Ontological shock. But there was something in me that shifted a little bit and thought, maybe this is real. And at that point, it was like anything's possible. The universe is massive. Who knows? I'm sure also the government are doing some crazy things with technology, and they're really advanced. So who knows? That stuff's probably like magic anyway. And then this was like a little piece of that jigsaw puzzle that went, we'll plop that in, and now that big piece has been finished off, and so they're real. I'm like, okay, I need to know everything about this. But I think that was more of a subconscious thing, like I need to know everything about this. It was just like my interest has peaked, and I started recording, like screen recording, like that's interesting, screen record, that's interesting, screen record, and yeah. Started putting it like, what do I do? Where does it go? And I started my journey at that point with Instagram and just started posting it on Instagram, and um, and it just grew really quickly. Like that
Nice.
first 10,000, which just I think is your once you do that, like you could be posting for years and have like 200 friends or whatever it is, and just to have this huge influx of people that started following it and commented, and almost like this little community at first started to build. And I'm talking to these cool people that are really interesting, and I was like, well, I'm that's what I'm doing now. So it just kept on building, and I kept on posting stuff, and it was sort of my journey. It was my own research. I thought I'm just going to share what I'm doing, and it might not be profound for other people that have been in this subject for a long time because they might already know this stuff. Like, obviously, we knew that years ago, but I didn't. So I'm going to share this because there's probably people like me who also didn't, and that might be of use to them. And that's it, really. It just kept on growing, and I became obsessive with it. And every night, and all of my spare time, I would be sitting in the bath, and I would be, bookmarking things, researching things, cross-referencing it with ChatGPT, finding out as much as I can, and go, right, I'm going to post that. And yeah, that's where we are.
Well, it
Where
turns
we are.
out there's a couple of 100,000 people that also were found that useful and interesting. So what hobbies and interests went extinct in order for you to take this on as a life-consuming hobby?
Oh, that's a good question. I used to do a lot of woodwork. A very quiet. I've moved house now, but in my old house, I had a garage basically that I'd converted into a workshop. So I had this beautiful. I made this big long workbench out of lots of pieces of wood and sanded it. It was beautiful, and I had all of my tools perfectly on the wall. And so I would go in there and I would fiddle around with bits of wood and make stuff. And I really like that. It's very therapeutic. So I used to do that a lot. And I've got like a Wendy house in this house now in the garden, which isn't quite the same. Tools up on the wall again, but it's not as inviting as my garage that I used to have. So, and it's just this last year seems really, really cold, like for the whole year, minus a month or so. So you don't really want to get out in the garden and sit in a cold shed. So that's gone to the wayside. And sports wise, I used to do a lot of basketball. I'm quite into basketball, but in the early days of like season one of the podcast, I was wearing like a sling because I'd had shoulder surgery, and I've never really felt comfortable with the sort of motion. So that's gone as well. So yeah,
Is what it is. Well, at least those carpentry skills came into play with building the ridiculously cool studio that you've got behind you.
yeah. Well, you say that this was all my dad. This was. I'm,
That was your opportunity to steal a lot of aura off your dad there, then.
yeah. I'm clearly a very broken person because then my back, the issue with my back, and it's yeah, probably need surgery on my back at some point fairly soon, I should think. Some of the stuff in my MRI was yeah, some issues there that have been ongoing for quite a long time. But it's one of those things like who's got an MRI machine at home that they can just go, oh, I feel a bit sore, I'll stick myself under that machine and see what's going on. So you never really know, do you, until it goes pop, and then you have to go somewhere professional and figure it out for sure.
Well, I'm glad you're on the mend a bit, mate. One of the things that I find amazing about the UAP files is like you can see from your office, that's all your personality. And that was for me when I first found you when you were tiny wee, when I was just trying to find out what on earth I'd seen and was going on. It was like the Instagram was just so cool because it was somebody with a very similar music taste to me and just data and no hype. Like we didn't know who you were, we hadn't seen your face. It was just a really cool personality in an account without shoving it down your neck. So who are your inspirations? Who are your like biggest influences when it comes to the pod and the Instagram? Because they're both unique.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not very good at compliments or receiving compliments.
I'm not asking for one back. It's fine.
I I don't know. I mean, as I said earlier on, my brain is all over the shop. and there's probably some undiagnosed ADHD there, genuinely, probably. But it's like I'm high functioning if I am. But I watch a lot, I listen to a lot, and I guess in terms of like podcasts and things, Joe Rogan's always been, I've always listened to Joe Rogan over the years. I knew him before he was, I say knew him, I don't know him, but I listened to him before he was a podcaster. So he was obviously is and was a stand-up comedian. So I've been to a couple of his shows live. He did one in Leicester Square. I took my brother to it many years ago. So this was sort of Sacred Cow days. And if you remember Sacred Cow, which is Bill Hicks and those guys that would,
Oh yeah.
yes, and they were sort of part of this, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, something like that, maybe longer. So I was obsessed with Sacred Cow, which was like a movement. I think they were like a group of guys that were just stand-up comedians. And they were quite advanced for the day, sort of slightly on the edge, but really funny guys. So he was one of the early influences, and then he just got into podcasting. I think if Joe Rogan can be the biggest podcaster in the world, and he's just being himself, just being himself, he's not an expert in anything particularly other than probably MMA, UFC, that sort of thing. But if he can do that, then anybody can. If you just be yourself, you'll find an audience. But he's a super funny guy. He's super intelligent, and he's got a lot of friends, which obviously helps. But you still find an audience, regardless of what you're interested in, and how funny you are, and as long as you're authentic, you will. So I guess I have something in my head that says, just give it a go, mate. You'll be all right. And somehow I'm able to sort of park the anxiety aside for a bit, and then you get through it and go, oh, that was okay. I could do that again. And there we
Turns
go.
out it works. Yeah. I think, but what you've got in common with Rogan's style is that he's confident enough to just let the guests talk. And I know from my own observations, but also the comments on the YouTube, that loads of people really appreciate that when you get somebody on and you just turn them loose. And sometimes when that's somebody like Danny Sheehan or someone, I'm allowed to say this.
Yeah.
We ask one question and then it's a rodeo for an hour. But it puts the guests at such ease. I think it's really, really effective. That's not even a question. I'm just
Yeah. Can we
being.
tell that story?
Pardon?
Can I elaborate on that
I
story? Because
would love you to tell that story because it's one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me.
so for people listening, so I say, I call, me and Tom have a conversation beforehand. We're going to interview him. This is the plan, right? What we'll do is, because there's a bit of a structure when we co-host an interview. Generally, the structure is like, I'll get it started. I'll say thanks and ask the first question, and then we just sort of bounce off one after each other. And if there's something particularly you want to ask, then you sort of have a follow on or whatever. So the plan was I ask a question, and then if we don't quite get into the UFO side of it, then I ask a second question, and then that's it. We're backwards and forwards. I asked the first question, and what was it? An hour later, he hadn't even stopped. God bless him. He hadn't even stopped. I had to interject a second question, like almost be slightly rude to go, I'm going to stop you, sort of thing. Oh, can I just, like, I'm waiting for take a deep breath so I can jump in, and it didn't seem to happen. He's like a didn't seem to happen. He's like a professional. I mean, he's an attorney, isn't he?
Yeah.
At heart, so he can talk. Full of information. Just his brain is an encyclopedia of past cases and information. But I don't think you spoke at all.
I
Am I?
didn't know. So and I'm saying this through nothing but appreciation because it was huge for me to get to speak to him after he's been at like citizen hearings and Iran Contra and as prominent as it gets. And I remember he said like, "Oh, hi Tom, nice to meet you." And then an hour and 20 minutes later he goes, "Thanks, Tom." And I was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
Daddy, it was so funny.
yeah,
But it was like after about 30 minutes, I was like, hold on, this is actually really funny. And then I was just trying not to giggle for the
Yeah.
rest, whilst also completely locked in on the fact that you're on the rare opportunity to have a podcast with somebody like Danny Sheehan. But God, it was funny, man.
It was. And that's the thing about recording on Zoom is you've got the little heads at the top of the screen, haven't you? So you've got the big screen, which is Danny talking, and then I can see just out of the corner of my eye, me and you. And I can see your face kind of going, this is happening. This this is right, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 50, 60 minutes. This is incredible. This is happening. And I'm like straight face. But it was really, really useful information and it was awesome to talk to him. And I wouldn't have changed it because it was just so much fun.
Mm.
The keeper, like, I don't know. It's hard to say unless you're there in the room. When you got that friend with you and just something is happening that both of you are finding hilarious, but just trying to resist it.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. No, it was. I mean, after a certain point, I was like, I don't want him to stop now because I just want to see how far this can go and which one of us is going to crack. But but it was great. So on the theme of that, then, because you've had such a diverse amount of guests, and I get the gist that some of your favorite ones aren't necessarily just the big, the Hollywood superstars of ufology. What are some of your more memorable ones that you've done?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you don't. What works is that connection. And I think it's great to have these big names on and get the information out of them and maybe get like a bit of a scoop. But to have a conversation with somebody for like an hour that you just gel and you think, we could be best friends, we could be hanging out at the weekend and doing stuff. And that's, yeah, I mean, there's a few. Andy Sariano, awesome guy, he's an animator. I think he works for Disney, but real cool guy. We had a podcast together. I want to say season 2, maybe. He was a lot of fun and very similar situation, at home with the kids and doing sort of dad stuff. And we really got on and just there was an instant connection and you can sense it and you can feel it. That was a lot of fun. Didn't get a lot of views. I mean, I thought it was super engaging because we just had a lot of fun. But I guess there's a chunk of the audience that wants sort of information and wants perhaps names and people in the scene. And so a couple of guys just talking, unless we're like celebs or whatever, which we're not, then it perhaps isn't as engaging. I don't know, but I found that super engaging. So that was good fun. Same with Tony Dean Smith, who's a
Mm.
film director, producer from Canada. Really nice guy, and again, just magic. I spoke to him, never spoke to him before, communicated via DM, but first time we had a conversation face to face, and it was just like talking to a relative, a brother, a really good friend. So that was a lot of fun. And then we've sort of kept in communication, and every now and again we have a bit of a few comments backwards and forwards and a bit of a chat. And I'm constantly thinking of that one conversation that we had. It was profound as well because here's a guy that super credible, really successful in his career, and he's opening up, I think, possibly for the first time on camera, about an experience he had as a child with his family on safari, I think in South Africa, I want to say it was, and just a skyscraper-sized UFO above their Jeep, and the family still remember it later. And I remember that
Behind
took
us was a massive stadium-sized craft in the air. And my dad and I, being on the outside of the Jeep, hopped out, and we both stood there, and we can both recall the event now. You can talk to my dad and my mom as well. My grandfather's now passed, but he remembered it as well. We were just sort of paralyzed in awe. My dad sort of famously in my memory, and his too, he's like, Jesus, it's like a skyscraper on its
later.
side.
And I remember that took me on this real big rabbit hole, or deep rabbit hole into how ridiculous the idea of group psychosis is. Like, it's just pseudoscience. They saw something. You can't explain that away. Well, maybe they're a bit confused. A skyscraper-sized UFO off their Jeep that they all remember still to this day, years later. No. No, that's not some kind of psychosis. So that was pretty profound for me. And, I've seen his films as well, and that was pretty cool. And this is like the early days and thinking I can actually talk to some of my like heroes and people that are great artists in their different respective fields and just pick their brains because I find them fascinating. I've always loved different forms of art. And now I can just talk to people because somehow I've got this sort of platform that enables that. It's awesome. It really is. And I think that spurs on the keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah.
That's a great answer. And I mean, his case is um, just incredible as well. Like you said, a skyscraper sized. I mean, for all we, even in ufology or whatever this is, we tend to gravitate towards tic tacs and things the size of a car over New Jersey and stuff. And yet, I love that interview that you did with him because he's literally recounting a memory, but it's a memory of something that cannot be, it's got no place in our reality. Where'd you park it? Like, where's it gone? Why isn't, why isn't the Hubble seeing these things speeding past? But he was telling the truth. And there are other cases like that too. So, in terms of cases, then, what kind of pulls you in the most? Because it's such a diverse field, and you've spoken to everybody from every field going that's had every different kind of experience going. So, which ones do you personally find more compelling?
That's a good question. I mean, I bounce around. I think a lot of us from the UK that are interested in subjects gravitate towards Rendlesham, and it is interesting. It is a really interesting case, but I think there's so much debate in that case about well, who saw what and on what day, and does this person contradict that person, and it's a bit messy for me. That case. I mean, there's a lot in there there's a lot of profound stuff that happened in that case. And then again, talking to Dan Isbell years later in his account, albeit he wasn't one of the original dudes. He was away from the place. He was driving in his car, but it was like the same night, clearly somehow related. His account was just incredible and also profound, and especially given his experience, a test pilot, he's flown everything, and yeah, he's a colonel, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of really credible people in that case, but I think because it's one of those, like a bit like Roswell, that it's been done to death, and it doesn't feel like when so many people have written books about it and talked about it, and there's been TV shows about it. It doesn't feel as exciting as some of the other cases that are perhaps lesser known that you can dig into, and perhaps there's that feeling of a potential of finding something that nobody else has found. So, yeah, I say that this other case is probably just as well investigated, but I find the aerial school really compelling. I love that case, absolutely love that case, and I'll often use that as an example when people say, "Well, there's no real evidence." A few people seeing something like, "Well, this is the whole school have seen this." And have you seen like they all drew pictures and they were like really similar? And then the teachers came out afterwards and said, "Oh yeah, actually we did see stuff." Like that's a good case. That is a really good case. So yeah, aerial school. Same thing with the Welsh case. It's gone off out of my head now. The Broadhaven.
Yeah.
Broadhaven case, very similar to the aerial school. And those guys, again, they're still recounting it. They're still holding their story. They're multiple different, real credible professions now that they're adults maintaining the same story. So, yeah, I find that the mass sighting cases are really, really compelling to me because it's the human. There's so much talk about like AI and our documents created to muddy the waters by like the CIA or whatever. Like we're working on some secret tech, so we'll just chuck some of this fake stuff out there and nobody really knows what's real and what's fake. But when you've got like a group of people that just remain consistent on their story for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I'm like, well, that's a lot for me, and it gets me over the threshold on those kind of cases. So yeah, the Tic Tac is a really good one as well for data. people underestimate how much data is in that because they just think, oh, Dave Fravor saw something, and there's something on radar. Could be anything on radar, and he might have misunderstood what he saw. But like, there's
Mm.
a lot more to that case. There's a lot of other pieces of the puzzle. When you put it all together, that's one of the most compelling data-rich cases that I think we've ever had. In
Mhm.
terms of multiple sensors, multiple witnesses, radar, and the government officially declassifying footage and putting it out there and say, okay, yeah, that is from that location, and the corroboration from Alex Dietrich and Commander David Fravor being both like super high level. Dave Fravor's a Top Gun pilot, and maintaining that consistency, and then going to Congress, putting his hand up and saying, "This is what I saw, and I'm gonna, double down." Yeah, that's a big case. I don't care what
Mm.
anybody's. You know, it's not
I
like
I agree, and for just to chip in to support that one, because obviously that's like the for me when people say what do you do, normally like prior to things like the age of disclosure or some of things like that, you used to just say, right, this is Commander David Fravor, and then give his history and be like, just watch this on Joe Rogan, but the pseudo skeptics and stuff kind of pull it apart and say it's everything from a seagull to a plastic bag or whatever. But there was an AWACS in the air, which is an incredible radar suite scanning everything there. Plus, we forget that they actually vectored him in to look at something that had been popping up for days before.
Yeah.
So there's if we take the blinkers off about even what we've seen, there is a vast amount of evidence out there somewhere. I mean, it was ORSAP or is it NIDS? Whoever Colin Kelleher was with, I forget, ORSAP.
WhatsApp.
They
Yeah,
did like an 80-page report with all the fluid data. So there's a hell of a lot of data still classified. And if there's nothing to it, why is it classified? So I really agree.
yeah, yeah, and Kevin Day as well. But I think people forget Kevin Day quite a lot, and it's sort of very much Dave Fravor. This is what Dave Fravor saw. But if you listen to Kevin Day talk, and he's been on the UAP Files podcast, and I got the opportunity to talk to him, and if anyone gets the opportunity, he's got like a he was wearing like I don't know, just well, he had a green screen that was somehow stuck on his screen when we started recording. I was like, I can't not interview him. I've got him on, but we can't figure out how to get rid of his green screen. So he had this massive logo sort of going around his jacket unintentionally, whilst also having this really profound conversation. It was quite surreal, but I love that guy, really, really sweet guy. But he was deeply affected by that.
Mm.
And his testimony is just, I mean, it's really profound. Like he's seeing these things, do things he has never seen. And, you know, and then Dave Fravor goes out and speaks up, and he feels that sense of like, I have to go and support him. I saw this as well. We were seeing this for days. There was just swarms of them, and they were going, it appeared like they were going into a portal, out of a portal, from space down to water level in just a second, half a second. Just impossible things to do. And so all of that corroboration from all of these super credible people, and he was like a radar specialist. So yeah, um, you don't get much better than that, really, do you?
No. And with Kevin as well, you can't say that it benefited him really because this isn't like a tough guy story like Fravor. Oh yeah, I got into a combat engagement with a UFO. Like by my book, you can imagine the skeptics going with that angle. But Kevin had a very traumatic
Yeah,
experience afterwards, and he's not benefited at all from coming forward. It's just through a sense of duty that he has done. So that that's very, very profound, and he's really brave in doing that.
yeah. You make
But
a really good point about that, about this sort of negative or at least neutral response to coming forward and being open. And you hear that a lot with debunkers and sort of pseudo skeptics that will say, people are grifting or people are coming forward just for some celebrity or something. Like, if you really pay attention to the people that have come forward, there's maybe one or two that have made some money, but there's hundreds of them that have come forward. And if anything, they've lost their clearances, they've lost money, they've lost jobs, they've lost their, like, if you're a military, if you're a soldier or a pilot or an officer in the CIA or whatever, you've got this outstanding career, you've got medals, you've got all of these real hero stories, I should imagine. And that's your background. That's what you retire with. But then when you start talking about UFOs, none of that matters anymore. That's all irrelevant. You're the weird UFO guy. You believe in aliens. What's the benefit? There's no benefit to these guys to come out and say this stuff. And I think people forget that's like the basic human psychology. You've been on some podcasts, like, podcasts aren't paying you to go on. Trust me, they're not. No one's going to get rich doing podcasts. Maybe you might get like an interview on a TV show. Most of those won't pay either. Maybe they'll pay for the flight or something, but they're not going to pay for you to appear. And if they do, it's going to be very low. These guys were on, high level, like Elizondo and Grush were on, I think, GS15 level, which is like, I don't know, $160,000 a year plus benefits, plus life insurance, plus, medical and all that stuff. They're not making that back anytime soon. So it takes a lot. And that's why we talk about bravery. And you hear that a lot, like, so brave. And other people think, well, how are they brave? They're just telling a ghost story, essentially. No, it takes a lot of bravery to say, I'm going to park my heroic, patriot history here, and I'm going to go forward from this point as just a weird UFO dude. That takes a lot. You've got to have real passion and belief in the cause, and deep patriotism, because you feel like it's the right thing to do for your country and for humanity. I'm going to talk about this because it's important. That takes a lot, very selfless.
Yeah, I've experienced that with the Vandenberg guys, because I was introduced to them and sort of making friends with them as just general people, but then you find out what they've done in their career, and it's like, oh, I was special forces in this place, and they dropped me off and picked me up 4 days later, and just trust people to do all these bonkers missions, and yet they're prepared to burn any opportunity to get a job, with a secret clearance or anything like that, by all of a sudden being a public person saying, I saw a UFO, or I saw a 50-foot ball of light, or something like that. Like, they don't need an image makeover. They quite happily just carry on and go on into some military advisor role or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's extraordinary. But
Look at Scott Gearan, a prime example. Scott Gearan is the epitome of an absolute badass, just hero. He was literally David Goggins' inspiration. Like, role model. He was a young David Goggins. That was his role model, Scott Gearan. And we interviewed him, didn't we? We talked to him, and he told us about his sighting, and he put a book together. He's not making, I don't know, 50 cents or whatever, or $1 from a book. Like, he's not getting rich from putting his pictures in the book and his story in the book. But he's just, he's survived a helicopter crash. The guy's last action hero style. He's a proper soldier, and that's a hell of a step to take when you've got this incredible, like, proper Terminator kind of history of, like, I'm just the man and people look up to me. And now it's like, I'm the UFO guy. Yeah, he's a prime example.
He's such a fascinating guy. I can't believe that we've become such great friends with him, it's such a privilege. But it's got to take a certain kind of mindset that I don't have, to be able to have a career that you can never talk about and you have to take to the grave. It's not like being a normal soldier or a fighter pilot, where when you retire you can be like, oh, I'm going to tell you about this combat engagement. Like, Scott had a life in the shadows. And regardless if he might have got medals and awards, like he can never tell his story. So then to completely flip that, and it's like the James Fox movie, isn't it? You know, I know what I saw, and he's just like, yeah, nope, that happened, and now people are getting to know him as the UFO guy, and it's like, oh, what's he done before? I can't see anything. Oh well, he's just this UFO guy. So it's like you said, it's almost counterproductive to the security of your
Yeah.
wind down session after these extraordinary careers that these people have had. It's a weird one. So speaking of weird paths and careers, yours has taken you from texting in the bath and then doing Instagram to Washington for documentaries and meeting Congress people. So how did that come about, and how much did they pay you, and are you a government plant?
So we just decided that, you know, the Instagram was going well. We were sat around at CIA headquarters. What was I going to do next? You know, what was going to infiltrate next? No, I out of the blue. So I've got a contacts page on Linktree, and it's, you know, a free website, I guess, where you can have all your links on there. And just out of the blue, I got an email via the Linktree, and it was somebody who was linked to J.J. Abrams, a guy called Kevin Lincoln, and he just contacted me and said, "Look, we're doing this documentary. We're interested in interviewing you. You know, could we set up a video call and have a conversation?" So I thought, this is someone winding me up. I get some weird messages from time to time. There's a lot of weird stuff, you know, that you get through in emails and DMs. And so I just did a bit of research, like, who is this guy? What's his name? Okay, yeah, he does work with J.J. Abrams. Okay, yeah, Bad Robot. Okay, that's his So we set up the video call. Sure enough, it's the guy on camera who I've been researching. It looks like the same guy. It doesn't look like AI to me. Okay, this is legitimate. This is very strange. What the hell do they want with me? I'm just a dude that sits in his spare room and like posts videos on Instagram. And I think at that point, it was the very early stages of, I want to say it's the very early stage of the podcasts. So I'd probably, you know, interviewed a few people, but I was and still am very much an amateur. So it didn't make any sense. I imagined that there were going to be these big names on this show, and why would they want me? Maybe the angle was, you know, more people are getting interested, and younger generation. So yeah, they said, "Do you want to come to us, or we can send a crew to you?" And I remember thinking, you're going to send people from America to come and interview me, like people, more than plural, you know. I'll come to you. That's fine. You make your life easier. I'd happily do that. So yeah, they flew me out to Washington and Baltimore. Stayed in Baltimore, and I think we filmed in Baltimore. Yeah, I was in 2 episodes, or maybe 3, of Beyond UFOs and the Unknown, which is produced by J.J. Abrams, and it was really good experience. I managed to hold it together. I was quite nervous the night before and that morning, but it all came together, and I was relatively pleased with my performance. I much prefer being in control of the editing process myself, if I'm honest, just because you can make as many mistakes as you want, really, and generally you can tidy it up afterwards, and you haven't got to be like a performer. You can just be yourself, and then if yourself's a bit of a mess that day, then you can edit that.
I was a fighter pilot, and when we were flying, it looked like a dark cube inside of a clear sphere.
The Pentagon's been lying to us about UFOs.
These cases often don't see the light of day.
People are taking UFOs more seriously.
Now there are documented incidents recording something out there.
It's the biggest news story in the history of mankind.
Can edit that. But no, it was okay. It was okay, and I learned a lot, and it gave me probably a bit more confidence to go, I managed that. You know, I did manage that. I could manage other stuff. Just do it, crack on. Um, yeah, but whilst I was there, I used that opportunity because Baltimore is very close to Washington. I think they share an airport. I think. I don't know, very confusing. I had to use Google Maps for everything when I was there. But I went to Washington, D.C., I went to Congress, and I thought, I'm going to go and find and speak to Congressman Tim Burchett. I'm just going to walk into his office and I'm going to ask him for an interview, and he's going to say yes, because I'm just going to be like, oh, it's that English guy. He's polite. He's really friendly. He's harmless. Yeah, I'll do an interview with him. And so I did. It is easy. It's not like in the UK. Like, you couldn't go and speak to a politician here. You can just knock on their door.
I know they
Get
set the dogs on you if you tried that here.
no, there's no way of doing that here. But in America, you'll go through security and then you can wait outside their office door. Okay, albeit, there's like a secretary between them and the next room. But you can just say, can I speak to Congressman Burchett, please? And they'll go, give us a second. And they'll go back. And he was great. He just, he came out and said, yeah, that's fine. And took me into his office, and we sat in his office and chatted. And they were doing voting. And so he kept like having a timer on the wall saying, voting time is running out and you've got to go and vote, and really important stuff. And he honestly left it to the last minute. He really did. And there were two other guys in suits that looked really formal that were also waiting whilst I was waiting. And I remember thinking at the time, like, they'd got there, I think, either before me or around the same sort of time. And they wanted to see him. And he clearly had very limited time because this timer was, counting down. And he invited me in the office and not them. And by the time we'd finished talking and he came out, it was too late to speak to them. So he had to go to the voting. It was incredible. And look, I know that people have got opinions on politics. And I think that's one of the things that I really try and avoid on the UAP files, is just to have zero politics, because this subject is bipartisan. It doesn't matter what leader you like or what your politics are. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is, like, what's the meaning of life? What's out there? What happens after you die? All of these big questions are just above party politics. So some people love him, some people hate him, whatever. In terms of the UFO subject, he's been outspoken. He's been leading the way for quite a long time. And I think he's got a genuine interest and a genuine belief in the subject. How far he'll get, I don't know. But it was great talking to him, and he agreed to come on the podcast, and we did about an hour, I think it was, quite a long interview. And we got to talk about all sorts of things, like his skateboarding and what he does in his spare time and music that he likes. It was so surreal, man. I'm there talking to a congressman about music. What a weird life we lead.
It really is. It really is. So when you were filming the documentary then, because this is a good opportunity, I think, to peep behind the curtain a little bit. A lot of people say, like, oh, they're just a talking head. They're given this to say, like, and I believe your experience was a lot more natural than that. So I'm sure when we see the final thing and it's all cool, super produced and everything, I think we perhaps lose a little bit of the innocence of the process when they're doing the filming. So what was it actually like?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't scripted. I wish it was. That would have made life much easier, knowing what they expect me to say and what but they didn't give me anything beforehand. I just turned up. There was a lot of people in this really cool, very well lit room. Like, there's a lot to learn about lighting, clearly, that I don't understand, because there was weird, funny little reflective lights and a little light here and a hair light and all sorts of things around the room. But when you look at the camera picture, you're like, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, it was just me sat there with 1,000 lights shined at my face and asked a lot of quite easy questions. Like, what got you into this? Why did you do it? What do you think about Congress? And, there were a few people that you understand the storytelling process where they ask you about, I was asked about Gary Nolan, Professor Gary Nolan. And I guess in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I understand. You're going to ask me about Gary Nolan, and you probably ask other people about him. And whilst you do that, then that introduces him into and that's how you help tell the story and push it along. So that was it, really. It was just asking a few fairly simple questions. Why are you here? How did you get here, talk us through your Instagram account, and the sort of podcast thing. And I think that was the idea, was that I've had this. There's a percentage of the UFO community that has been kind of ignited since this 2017, 2023 is it Congress? I think it was. Like this stuff's happened, and all of a sudden these people have got into the subject that perhaps weren't really that interested before. Why is that? And I was the social media side of it, I guess. Yeah,
That's refreshing to hear that. You are hearing people's actual takes. Obviously, you can't speak for all documentaries when you hear this, but this is the only gigantic documentary we've got to hear about. So, season 1 was Zoom calls. Season 2, you and I, thankfully, we did our first home invasion with Rich, where we did the tape. Season 3, you've now got an amazing studio. What's coming?
Well, technically we're season 4 now. I think because season 1, I kind of started season 1 towards the end of the year. So like my season 1 was only a few months, and I was like, well, I can't call it season 1. It's the new year now. It needs to be season 2. So yeah. I just thought, I mean, you know how it is when you're sitting next to somebody and you're having that human interaction. It's just like a level up. Like this is better than just talking, looking at you while I'm talking, but sitting next to you and having there's just an energy. There's an energy there. And I wanted to be able to replicate that. It's difficult because a lot of people that we talk to are in the States and they're in other parts of Europe and stuff. But there are some people in this country. And why not? Why not try and do it? You're not too far away. Pete's not too far away. I've got a couple of people that are actually really nearby who would be more than happy to come on and talk. And hopefully, if I grow this enough, then other people will be prepared to travel perhaps a bit further to come on the podcast in the studio. So I call it the studio. It's my spare room still, but yeah. Yeah, that was the thought process. It was just, I'm trying to constantly try to be a bit better with each podcast and each season, I guess, because, you're never always up. Sometimes you're like, that went wrong and then that works. Oh, that's great. I'll try that again. Oh, it didn't work this time. But you just try and improve the quality and the data, as much information as you can get to people in an engaging way that they're going to take in and find value in. And it's constantly trying to find ways to just tweak that a little bit. And I just love the idea of not how, setting up the cameras and setting up the audio and it working, and then being able to just sit there and forget about it and have a good old chat like you're at the pub. You're having a coffee with your mate and just have that really engaging conversation. And I think that will be more engaging for people who watch it because it's that rich sound, that rich picture, and they feel like they're in the room with you more so than video calls. So that's the idea. It's early days though.
I love it. So, all right then. So the next question, I guess, would be, if you had infinite budget and somehow even more hours in the day, what would you do if you just had carte blanche to do whatever you wanted with UAP Files? What's your current dream?
It would probably be a mixture of a couple of things. It would probably be filmmaking on the road, documentary filmmaking, interviews, and getting more people in the studio, having the studio so it's set up and much simpler to just switch on. And you're like, when you start buying stuff for the studio, for like a studio setting, you realize how expensive everything is. And even if you reinvest all of your money, which I do, like any profits that I make from UAP Files, monetization and stuff from YouTube and all the ads and stuff, it all gets reinvested. It's cameras, it's sound gear, it's audio, it's software and stuff. So you really do understand how expensive that sort of stuff is to have like a proper purpose-built studio with all the lighting and all of the best kit. So that's probably what I would do, is have it so it was just perfect. But also I'd be on the road. I think I'd be going to visit people, getting them on camera, getting their testimony, looking into cases and trying to get corroborative evidence and witnesses. I find that really interesting. I love interviewing new people, especially in person, and then putting that together. I'd be like James Fox, but different. Like what he does. I'd love to do that, if that makes sense. There's only one
Absolutely.
James Fox. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be James Fox. I tried to be myself, but that style of going out there, traveling wherever you need to, putting together a film over a period of time, and then presenting it as this really interesting, useful piece of information that's authentic. You're not trying to bamboozle people with all sorts of fake bombshells. It's like, no, this is what the people are saying, and this is where the evidence taken me. Make of it what you will.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I avoid being negative about anybody, but I don't like the style where it's like a fake journey, and you see that sometimes, like with Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. They're sat in a perfectly lit studio and they're like, "What? Oh my God, we need to go there straight away!" And there's already a camera team and full studio crew set up. So I really like the James Fox thing of he's he's discovering it in real time, and the authenticity is there along with all the highs and lows. And like my taste of that was when we went and interviewed Rich, because it's like you can stand in that guy, you're in his home, you're surrounded by his personality and his authenticity, and then you can stand where he stood, where he had his sighting, and that was just something that you could never recreate through a Zoom call or anything like that.
Yeah.
And my battery's about to go. That is a fully charged battery. And then watch it now. I'm not touching the zoom. It'll go like that. Look.
So I guess just to wind things up then on a silly note, we do get a lot of stick in the comments every now and then, and how do you deal with that? I'm quite lucky and blessed, really, that I don't get a lot of. I think the nastiest comment I've had is like, "Why on earth do you speak so slowly?" But how do you kind of stay chipper and stay on track?
That's a good question. I think I'm quite a resilient person. There are other people that when you go into social media and you read the comments, you it really bothers them and it affects them and they'll reply to everything. And if I ever reply to a negative comment, it's usually just for a bit of fun. Like you can say something horrible. I mean, if it's like really horrible, offensive, you're
This isn't
gone.
an invitation, by the way, but yeah.
Yeah, this is your YouTube channel, man. It's just write what you want, guys. No, no. Um, no, I would have some fun with people. If it's abusive, they're gone and they're deleted. I don't want, they're blocked. I don't want that in the community. That's what we're trying to build is a positive, inclusive community for everybody. You can have fun, you can have a difference of opinion, but you've got to be reasonable and so that's unacceptable. But if you're just a bit cheeky or you're like, oh, you say a lot, mate. You say but, and like I do, but that's me. That's me as a human. It did affect me at first. Like at the very first, I would rewatch it and think, oh, you've said like a lot. You've said a lot. Why do you say so much? You should cut that out. And you try to, and then you've got like, you're actively aware that you're doing it. When you're talking to somebody, you go, right, make sure you don't say this time. And then you're like forgetting what you're saying. Forget all that. Just try and be authentic, try and be yourself. If people can't deal with the ums and the buts, it's a big deal. There's 1,000 other podcasters they can go and listen to. Yeah. But I just play with them. Thank you so much for your comment. Really appreciate it. Oh, thanks, man. No, but I was being sarcastic to you. And then, ghost. It's fun, but ultimately it just helps it helps the algorithm think that your videos are successful. So they're only, cutting off their nose to spite their face by propping up your video by telling you how rubbish you are at making videos. Water off a duck's back, as we say.
It's very true. It's very true. And it's funny how some people really take offense, like when you don't confirm exactly what their theory is about the thing. But I don't know. It's weird. But on the subject of that, like to you, as a final question, what does disclosure mean to you? Because that's something like that's a wasp that I chew quite a lot. Is that question? But what is it to you?
It's a really hard question to answer, isn't it? It is a really hard question. I bounce around all the time, and I like to ask this question, or in a roundabout way. You know, what does disclosure look like? What's day two of disclosure? I often ask that question because it generates a different response in different people, doesn't it? A very different response. I think there's an argument that we've had it already long time ago. It's just been more subtle than we expect. There's an argument that it's an individual thing, that disclosure is just a realization yourself that we're not alone. And I guess I kind of had that when Grush was talking. I guess that would have been my disclosure moment. But I think when we talk about disclosure from a government perspective, like Congress, like, oh, they're going to disclose stuff in Congress, or Trump might come out and talk about it, or, you know, he's holding a press conference and it might be about. I think the hope there is not that they're going to come out and tell us that here's all the secrets that we've kept hidden from you for many, many years. I think the hope is that they, whoever they are, somebody official that comes out and says something that makes everybody go, okay, that's probably real then, whoever that would be, however that would be presented. But it opens up the possibility for mainstream everybody to go, okay, well, let's investigate this, let's look into this, let's study this. And that would be life-changing, I think, for humanity, because if you've got no stigma anymore, because this is real now, and it's been officially recognized as real, and, you know, rubber stamped by Donald Trump or Keir Starmer or whoever it is that comes forward and says it. Okay, so that's real. Let's spend some money on science. Let's start training in whatever the technology is. Let's start building that. Are we going to get free energy? Are we going to be able to solve lots of disease? Is that all of these possibilities that could benefit humanity start to be a potential possibility, which is really exciting. And I think that's, for me, that's like all I'm holding on to, is we might get a renaissance of technology, a renaissance of healthy people, I guess, from, you know, solving all kinds of illness and disease. And there might be that potential of like, okay, we're one species, so let's not worry too much about borders. You know, let's be a bit more one species kind of thing, which, where are we today, man, with what's going on in the world? That would be pretty amazing to just bring people together a little bit, to go, those guys up there or down there, wherever they are, you know, in the ocean, wherever, that's quite a big deal. Maybe we're not so different. It wouldn't be the end of the world if that was to, you know, if we were to hurry that along a little bit with an official disclosure of we're not alone sort of thing. So I think for me, that's what I'm hoping for. And a lot of people get really negative about the government and go, they're never going to say anything. Don't waste your time on them. Like, maybe not, but maybe they'll just give us that little thing, that little smidgen of information that will have a massive chain effect. And that's what I'm holding on to from them. But I honestly think that, generally speaking, 99% of it is going to be an individual thing of just paying attention to the subject, and it will show itself to you. It will manifest in one way or another, and that is your disclosure. In a roundabout way. Does that make sense?
Perfect answer. I love that. I think you nailed that, mate. In fact, I'm going to probably write that down. Yeah. That's wicked. Well, dude, this channel would not exist were it not for you. So I don't know whether that's something to thank you for or curse you for, but either way, I wouldn't have it any other way. And I wish you all the very best, and can't wait for whatever adventures we've got coming up the road.
Really, man. Well, look, let me just also say that my channel, whatever I do, wouldn't exist without you, because the conversations that we've had, the back and forths, there's been so many deep conversations where you've been my spirit guide from very, very early on. And we've not always agreed on stuff, but we've done it respectfully. And that's helped, because I think a big problem that we have within this UFO community, let's call it that, like UFO Twitter, whatever, is this silos and the echo chambers where people just agree with each other I think it's really, really, really useful to just have somebody that's honest with you, but does it in a way that's respectful and compassionate, and has their own beliefs, and it's you align on a hell of a lot. And so to have you to fill that spot, had I not, I would have been quite a lost little sheep, just kind of trying to navigate this world on my own, and not really having that person to have that back and forth with, and somebody that I trust, and somebody who's got a really great mind and is able to put pieces together that I couldn't put together. And that's really helped me. So I think you need to take some credit, because I think you talk about me and your channel, but you've come along on this journey with me from very, very early on, and it's made a massive, massive impact on me. And I think we've got a bright future together. We've got a bright future ahead of us, and sky is the limit, man. There's nothing stopping us. We started from our bedrooms, and look at what we've done. Look at you. I mean, you had a congressional whistleblower hanging out with you and your mum in Spain. Man, that's some weird stuff, but that's the sort of stuff that happens to us. I get flown out to America to do a show with J.J. Abrams. This is big stuff. You're talking to first-hand witnesses of, extraordinary things that have been discussed in Congress. You're getting the first interviews with some of those guys, from Vandenberg. So yeah, I think we've got an exciting future ahead, and this subject is very positive for me, and I think for yourself as well. I don't want to speak for you, but I can't see anything negative coming from this subject. It's only positive, and I think that's wonderful. And the more people that we can bring in to this positive subject, the better.
I don't even know what to say, man. That was you talked about David Goggins. I don't think he could have put it like that. Thank you so much. It's this topic's like football, isn't it? Like we put our different coloured shirts on and throw bricks at each other and tell each other we hate each other, and we forget that we all love the same sport. And I can't find anybody to take me seriously, so you're not going to get rid of me anytime soon. But thank you so much, man. It's always a blast, and yeah, like I said, I can't wait to see what's coming next.